The hangar of the diplomatic vessel Aurora's Promise was alive with sound and light. Huge panels along the walls glowed with soft blue energy, humming as they powered the docking systems. Engineers shouted commands to one another, their voices bouncing across the steel corridors. Service drones hovered overhead carrying containers of supplies for the ship's long journey. Daniel stood near the edge of the hangar, his hands shoved into the pockets of his gray engineer's uniform. He was 26 years old, one of the youngest human engineers assigned to the Aurora's Promise, and he still felt small compared to the scale of everything around him. The ship was not just a vessel, it was a moving embassy, carrying representatives of many worlds who had gathered to strengthen fragile alliances. For Daniel, it was both the greatest honor and the greatest pressure of his short career. He pretended to check the readings on a datapad, though his attention kept drifting. His heart was pounding harder than usual. Today was the first time he would see the Alari ambassador arrive in person. He had read the reports about her species. Crystalline skin that reflected light like gemstones, tall figures that seemed carved from living marble, and voices said to sound like music. But no report, no image, could prepare him for the moment. She stepped into the hangar. The docking doors slid open with a deep hiss and a smaller shuttle glided into place. As its ramp lowered, Daniel felt the hangar grow quieter. The chatter, the clanging tools, even the hum of drones seemed to fade as everyone's eyes turned toward the arriving guest. She appeared at the top of the ramp. Ambassador Seraphine of the Alari was taller than any human in the hangar. Her skin shimmered in shades of silver and pale blue, catching the light as if each movement scattered fragments of stars. Long strands of translucent hair flowed behind her, glowing faintly like threads of crystal. Her eyes, clear and radiant the color of frozen oceans, moved across the hangar with calm authority. She walked with a grace that made each step seem part of a dance. Daniel's throat tightened. He had expected beauty, but not this. Not the kind of beauty that made the world around him blur. Wow, she's gorgeous. The words slipped from his mouth, barely louder than a breath. He thought no one would hear over the sounds of the hangar. His next words came without thinking, from a place deep in his heart. I wish I had a wife like her. The moment the words left his lips, Daniel's face burned with shame. He froze, his datapad clutched tightly in his hands. He hadn't meant to speak aloud. It was supposed to stay in his mind, a harmless thought carried away by the awe of the moment. But then, it happened. Seraphine's head turned. Slowly, deliberately, her luminous eyes fixed on him across the hangar. She had heard him. Daniel's heart stopped. His legs felt weak, as though the floor had shifted beneath him. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the machinery behind him. He prayed she would dismiss the sound, that she would not know it came from him. But her gaze did not leave. She studied him with an expression that was not anger, not amusement, but curiosity. The officers at the front stepped forward, greeting Seraphine with respectful bows and formal words. She acknowledged them, but only after a pause that stretched, long enough for Daniel to feel the weight of her attention. He lowered his head quickly, staring at the datapad though the numbers blurred before his eyes. For the rest of the arrival ceremony, Daniel kept to the side, doing everything he could to blend in with the other engineers, his stomach twisted with embarrassment. What if the ambassador reported him for disrespect? What if he had insulted her people without realizing it? He knew the Alari valued dignity and composure. What if his foolish whisper had already broken some unspoken rule? When the ceremony ended, Seraphine and her guards left the hangar, disappearing into the grand halls of the vessel. The tension slowly dissolved, and the noise of the hangar returned. Crew members laughed, muttered, and carried on with their work. But Daniel could not shake the memory of her eyes. Hours later, Daniel sat alone in the maintenance bay, repairing a malfunctioning drone. He tried to focus on the tiny gears and circuits, but his hands moved automatically, his mind elsewhere. She heard me, he whispered to himself. Of all the stupid things to say. The door slid open behind him. He looked up and nearly dropped the drone. It was her. Seraphine stood in the doorway, her crystalline form glowing softly in the dim light of the bay. She was alone, without guards or attendants, her presence filling the room with quiet power. Daniel scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his stool. "Ambassador, I wasn't expecting—" She raised a hand gently, silencing him without a word. Her steps were silent as she approached, her gaze steady and unreadable. Daniel felt as though the very air around him shifted, growing heavier and brighter at once. "You spoke," Seraphine said at last. Her voice was calm, but there was music in it, like wind through glass chimes. "In the hangar. Your words reached me." Daniel's mouth went dry. I didn't mean... It was an accident. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful." Her head tilted slightly, the crystals of her hair catching the light. "Disrespectful?" she repeated, tasting the word. "No. Your tone was not one of insult. It was something else. Something pure." Daniel's ears burned. He wished the floor would open and swallow him whole. It was foolish. "Please, Ambassador, forget I said anything." But she did not forget. She stepped closer, her radiant eyes searching his face. "Humans speak of wives, partners of choice, bonded not by legacy but by affection. This word carries weight among your kind, does it not?" Daniel nodded, slowly, unsure where this was going. "Yes, a wife is someone you love, someone you choose to spend your life with. It's important to us." "Interesting," she murmured. Her gaze softened, though curiosity still burned within it. "Among the Elari, bonds are forged by legacy, by duty. We do not speak such words with the same meaning. Yet when you spoke them, I felt something I had not felt before." Daniel blinked, stunned. "You felt something?" Seraphine's lips curved faintly, though it was not quite a smile. "Your whisper carried honesty. Honesty is rare in the halls of diplomacy, rare and valuable." For a long moment, silence filled the bay. Daniel's heart raced, but he found himself meeting her gaze despite his fear. There was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity, only a spark of something he could not name. Finally, Seraphine straightened, her presence towering yet graceful. "Do not fear, Daniel," she said softly, surprising him by speaking his name. "Your words are safe with me. But know this. Sometimes the smallest whisper can echo louder than the grandest speech." And with that, she turned and left, her figure vanishing into the corridor like a fading star. Daniel stood frozen, the drone still clutched in his trembling hands. He had no idea what he had just started. The next morning aboard the Aurora's Promise began as usual. The massive ship drifted through the silent stars, its corridors filled with the hum of engines and the rhythm of routine. Diplomats prepared their speeches, security officers patrolled. The hulls and engineers, like Daniel, ran from one repair task to the next. But nothing felt usual for Daniel. The memory of last night haunted him. Ambassador Seraphine had come to him alone, and spoken to him as though his whisper had meaning. She had not mocked him, nor reported him. Instead, she had questioned him, studied him, as if his words mattered. For a human engineer at the very bottom of the diplomatic ladder, that was both terrifying and unbelievable. Daniel tried to keep busy, hoping work would push the memory away. He crawled into tight passages to check power conduits, replaced broken circuits, and calibrated drone sensors. Yet each time he paused, his mind drifted back to her crystalline eyes. Sometimes the smallest whisper can echo louder than the grandest speech. Her words echoed inside him, stubborn and alive. Later that afternoon, Daniel was called to the main atrium to inspect a malfunctioning display screen. The atrium was a vast space, filled with banners of many worlds and fountains, shaped like spirals of light. It was where ambassadors often met informally, outside the strict rules of council chambers. Daniel set down his toolkit near the broken display and began unscrewing the outer panel. He focused on the wires, relieved to lose himself in simple, predictable work. But then he felt it. A shift in the air. A hush. He looked up, and there she was again. Ambassador Seraphine stood across the atrium, surrounded by a small circle of her attendants. Her presence drew attention from everyone nearby. But instead of speaking with the diplomats, her gaze wandered across the room until it found him. Daniel froze. Her eyes lingered for a moment. Then, with deliberate grace, she dismissed her attendants and walked straight toward him. Daniel's hands fumbled with the wires. "Oh no, not again," he muttered under his breath. She stopped beside him, her crystalline form glowing softly in the atrium's light. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying the calm strength of flowing water. He nearly dropped his screwdriver. "Ambassador, I'm just fixing this panel. It'll only take a minute." "You may continue," she replied. She lowered her gaze to watch his hands work, as though fascinated by something as simple as repairing wires. Daniel's ears burned. He tried to focus on the task, but her presence was overwhelming. Finally, he could not hold back. "Ambassador, may I ask why you're here? With me?" Her eyes lifted. "Because your words interest me." "My words?" "In the hangar. And later, in the bay. You spoke of a wife. You spoke with honesty." Her tone was not accusatory but thoughtful, like a scholar considering a puzzle. "I wish to understand this human way of bonding." Daniel swallowed hard. "You mean marriage?" "Yes. Among my people, unions are not chosen. Families arrange them, guided by legacy and duty. Affection is secondary." But your whisper carried a weight of longing. "Why does your kind place such meaning on this bond?" Daniel hesitated. He had never expected to explain something so personal to an alien ambassador. Yet her eyes held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. "Well," he began slowly, "marriage isn't just about duty for us, it's about love. About choosing someone because your heart wants them, not because tradition tells you. A wife, or a husband, isn't just a partner for survival. They're someone you share everything with. Someone who makes life better even in the hardest times." Seraphine tilted her head slightly, her crystalline hair catching the light. "Love," she repeated softly as though testing the word on her tongue. "A strange concept. In diplomacy, love is seen as weakness. But you describe it as strength." Daniel nodded. "It is strength. At least for us. When two people care for each other, they can endure things they couldn't face alone." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Seraphine asked, "And you? Do you speak of this from experience?" Daniel's chest tightened. He shook his head with a small, awkward laugh. "No, I've never been married. I guess that's why my whisper slipped out. I've always wondered what it would be like to have that kind of connection." Her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful and sharp. "Your honesty is unusual here. Most who speak to me hide behind polished words and careful masks. Yet you speak as though the masks do not exist?" Daniel smiled nervously. "That's probably because I'm not a diplomat, I'm just an engineer." "Just?" she repeated as though the word puzzled her. He shrugged. "I fix things, keep the ship running. Nothing important compared to what you do." But to his surprise, Seraphine shook her head. "Without engineers, this vessel would fall silent. Without your hands, no diplomat could speak across the stars. Do not diminish your value." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent years feeling invisible, overshadowed by commanders and officials. To hear an alien ambassador speak of his worth, it left him both humbled and strangely proud. Over the next several days, Seraphine sought Daniel out more than once. Sometimes she found him in the hangar, sometimes in the maintenance bay, sometimes even in the dining hall. Each time she asked questions about humanity. What is family to you? Why do humans celebrate birthdays? Why do you smile when you greet one another? Her questions were endless, her curiosity unbroken. Daniel did his best to answer, using simple words, sharing stories of his childhood, his parents, his younger sister back on Earth. He told her about human laughter, about music, about the joy of small things like sharing food with friends. In return, she shared fragments of Alari traditions, how her people bonded their unions not with rings, but with crystals that merged into shared light, how they valued legacy above all, ensuring each generation strengthened the family line, how affection was seen as a fleeting spark, too unstable to guide a life. But, Seraphine admitted one evening as they walked along the observation deck, stars glittering beyond the glass, when I listen to you, I begin to wonder if perhaps we have overlooked something, if perhaps strength lies not only in duty, but in choice. Daniel glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. Are you saying you think love might matter? She did not answer immediately. Her gaze drifted toward the stars, their light shimmering in her crystalline skin. I am saying, she replied at last, that your whisper has stirred questions in me, questions I never thought to ask. But not everyone was blind to these moments. Whispers began among the crew. Engineers noticed the ambassador speaking, often with Daniel. Security officers muttered about how unusual it was for her to spend so much time with a single human. And among the other ambassadors, rumors spread of Seraphine's curious fascination with an engineer. Some saw it as harmless. Others saw it as dangerous. Daniel overheard fragments of these whispers when passing through the halls. His stomach twisted each time. He never wanted attention, especially not the kind that could upset politics. One evening, Chief Engineer Harrow pulled him aside. Listen, kid, the older man said, his voice low and serious. You need to be careful. Ambassadors don't talk to engineers like us unless there's a reason. If people think you're stepping above your station, it could cause trouble. For you. For all of us. Daniel nodded, though inside his chest tightened with conflict. He didn't want to cause problems, but he also couldn't ignore Seraphine's questions, her curiosity, the way her eyes seemed to see him not as just an engineer, but as something more. The turning point came one late evening in the garden chamber, where artificial trees glowed with soft light and streams of water ran along smooth stone paths. Daniel had gone there to clear his mind after a long day. To his surprise, Seraphine was already there, standing near the water. Daniel, she said softly as he approached. He hesitated. Ambassador, people are starting to talk. About us. I don't want to cause you any trouble. Her eyes met, his, clear and unwavering. Let them talk. Truth is not shaped by whispers. What matters is what we choose to learn from each other. Daniel stared at her, caught between fear and something deeper, something he could not yet name. Why me? He asked quietly. Why not one of the diplomats? Why not someone important? Seraphine stepped closer, her presence luminous. Because you spoke without mask. Because you reminded me that even the smallest voice can hold truth. And because... She paused, her gaze softening. I feel I understand myself better when I speak with you. Daniel's breath caught. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away. The water, the trees, the ship, even the stars outside. There was only her, standing before him, her crystalline, light reflecting in his wide human eyes. He had whispered once without meaning to, but now words pressed at the edge of his tongue again. Words he was almost afraid to say. Instead, he held them back. The moment was fragile, and he knew it would echo into the days ahead. That night, Daniel lay awake in his cabin, staring at the ceiling as the hum of the ship surrounded him. He thought of her words. He thought of the way she looked at him, not with judgment, but with curiosity and something almost gentle. He knew now that something had begun between them, something small, perhaps, like a whisper. But whispers could grow. And in the quiet of his cabin, Daniel wondered where this path would lead. The council chamber of the Aurora's promise was vast, shaped like a circle so no world would seem above another. Flags of many species hung from the high walls, and the center floor glowed with a symbol of unity. Around the circle sat ambassadors from more than 20 civilizations, each one representing their people's pride and hope. It was supposed to be a place of peace. Yet today, tension filled the air like a storm waiting to break. Ambassador Seraphine of the Alari sat tall and calm, her crystalline form shining in the chamber's soft light. But her calm was not shared by the others. Whispers spread from seat to seat. Faces turned toward her, some curious, some suspicious. And at the edge of the chamber, standing with the engineers who kept the systems running, was Daniel. He was not supposed to be part of the council's business. His job was only to fix panels and manage the power flow. But he could feel the weight of every glance thrown toward Seraphine. And sometimes, though only for a heartbeat, her eyes would flicker toward him. That was enough for the whispers to grow louder. The council began with formal reports, but soon, an ambassador from the Vryan rose to speak. The Vryan were tall, insect-like beings, their bodies covered in dark armor. Their representative's voice clicked sharply as he turned his many eyes toward Seraphine. "Ambassador Seraphine," he said, "your behavior aboard this vessel has raised questions. It has been noted that you spend much of your time with an engineer, a human engineer." The chamber grew still. Daniel's chest tightened. "This," the Vryan continued, "suggests favoritism. It suggests weakness. Are we to believe that the Alari, a people of ancient legacy, would lower themselves to private discussions with one of no status?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Daniel wanted to shrink into the wall. Heat filled his face. He had known. People were talking, but to hear it spoken aloud before the council, it felt like a spotlight had burned straight onto him. Seraphine, however, did not flinch. She rose slowly, her presence commanding the room. "The Alari speak with all who carry truth," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "Status is not the measure of wisdom," the Vryan hissed. "Wisdom from a mechanic?" Another ambassador joined in, a scaled being from the Zirak Alliance. "If the Alari abandon tradition for human affection, what does that mean for our alliances? Can we trust their loyalty if they give their attention to one individual rather than the council as a whole?" The words struck like blades. Daniel felt the stares of dozens of alien eyes pressing on him, accusing, weighing. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his throat locked tight. Seraphine's voice rang clear. "Do not mistake curiosity for betrayal. The Alari do not bend their loyalty to one man or one species. But I will not ignore the truths I discover, wherever I find them." Her words silenced the chamber, but the unease remained. The council continued, but Daniel could not focus. Every sound, every glance felt sharper than before. When the session ended, he slipped away quickly, praying no one would stop him. That evening, Daniel sat in the maintenance bay, his tools untouched on the table. His hands shook as he replayed the council in his mind. He had not spoken a single word, yet his presence had nearly caused a storm. The door slid open behind him. He didn't need to look to know who it was. "Daniel," Seraphine said softly. He stood quickly. "Ambassador, His words tangled. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to put you in danger." She stepped closer, her light shimmering in the dim room. "You did not place me in danger, their fear did." "But it's because of me," Daniel burst out. "Because you spend time with me. They think you're weak. They think I'm—" His voice broke with frustration. "I'm nothing compared to them, just an engineer." Seraphine's eyes fixed on him, sharp and unyielding. "Do you truly believe that?" Daniel faltered. "It's the truth." "No," she said, her tone firm but not harsh. "Truth is what I saw when you spoke of love. Truth is what I saw when you answered my questions with honesty, not performance. Do not call yourself nothing, you are human, and that matters." Her words struck deep. For a moment Daniel could not speak, but before he could reply the alarm blared. A red light flashed through the maintenance bay. A mechanical voice filled the air. "Warning. Unauthorized vessel approaching. Shields at risk." Daniel and Seraphine exchanged a look. The tension of the council was about to turn into something far more dangerous. The ship shook as the enemy vessel fired. The Aurora's promise was not a warship. It was built for peace, for diplomacy. Its defenses were strong enough to deter pirates, but not enough to withstand a full assault. Daniel ran to the control panel, his fingers flying across the keys. "Shields at 60% and dropping," he shouted. Seraphine's crystalline body glowed brighter, a sign of Alari energy gathering within her. "Who dares attack during council?" she murmured, her tone sharp with fury. The comms crackled and the face of a hostile commander appeared on the screen. His features were scarred, his eyes burning with anger. "The council is a lie," he snarled. "Your alliances are weakness. Today we break them apart." Then the transmission cut. The ship shook again as another blast hit. Sparks flew across the bay. Daniel gritted his teeth. "We need to reroute power to the shields. If we don't, the next shot will punch through." Seraphine placed her hand on the panel. Her body glowed, and to Daniel's shock, streams of crystalline energy flowed from her into the system. Lights across the bay flared. The shields, once dropping fast, surged back upward. "You can do that?" Daniel asked, wide-eyed. Her lips curved faintly. "The Alari are not without gifts." Together they worked. Daniel with his tools and quick thinking, Seraphine with her strange, luminous power. For a moment, human hands and alien energy moved as one, keeping the ship alive against the assault. But even as they fought, Daniel knew the danger was not only outside. The whispers of the council would grow louder after this, and Seraphine's bond with him, whatever it was, would only make her enemies more determined. The attack ended as suddenly as it began. The hostile vessel retreated, chased off by arriving reinforcements. The Aurora's promise drifted damaged but alive. In the aftermath, diplomats rushed to restore order. Engineers scrambled to repair systems, and rumors spread faster than fire. Some said Seraphine's power had saved them. Others whispered that she had endangered them by tying herself to a human. Daniel heard it all as he moved through the corridors. Every word cut deeper. That night he sat alone in his cabin, staring at the ceiling. He thought of his whisper in the hangar, the way her eyes had caught him. He thought of their walks, their talks, her endless curiosity. And he thought of the council's suspicion, the danger of whispers turning into storms. For the first time, he wondered if he should step away, for her sake. A soft chime sounded at his door. He rose and opened it, and there she was, her crystalline form glowing softly in the dark hallway. "Daniel," Seraphine said quietly, her eyes steady. "Do not let fear silence you. You are not the cause of this storm. You are the reason. I see the stars differently." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to hold on to that fragile thread between them. But deep inside, he knew part 3 of their journey was only beginning. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside the council was just waiting to break, and he had no idea if either of them would survive it. The corridors of the Aurora's promise buzzed with hurried footsteps. Engineers, officers, and diplomats moved quickly, repairing damage from the earlier attack and preparing for what might come next. The air smelled faintly of burned circuits, and the walls still bore black marks where sparks had flown. Daniel walked briskly through the ship, a toolkit slung over his shoulder. His mind was heavy with worry. The first attack had shaken everyone, and though the enemy had retreated, no one believed it was over. Rumors said the hostile faction was regrouping for another strike. More than that, Daniel worried about Seraphine. Ever since she had poured her strange crystalline energy into the ship's systems, whispers had spread like wildfire. Some praised her for saving them. Others claimed she had interfered dangerously, bending the vessel's systems in ways they didn't understand. And through it all, his own name was tied to hers. He wished he could disappear into the background again, but it was too late for that. The next evening, the second attack began. Daniel was in the engine room when the alarms blared. The ship shuddered violently as enemy fire struck its shields. Panels rattled, lights flickered, and the floor shook under his boots. Engineers scrambled to their stations, shouting over the rising noise. "Shields dropping fast," someone yelled. Daniel rushed to the main console. His fingers flew across the keys as he rerouted power, trying to keep the systems alive. "We can't take this much longer," he muttered. The ship rocked again, harder this time. A loud explosion echoed through the corridor outside. Daniel's stomach sank. The enemy wasn't just targeting the shields now. They were going for the heart of the ship. Suddenly, the door to the engine room slid open and Seraphine strode inside. Her crystalline form glowed brightly, her presence steady even as the vessel trembled. "Daniel," she called. "The enemy has breached the lower decks. We must act." Before he could answer, another blast shook the ship, throwing them both off balance. A heavy support beam above groaned and collapsed. Daniel lunged forward, shoving Seraphine out of the way. The beam crashed down behind them, sealing the door with sparks and twisted metal. Smoke filled the air. The console flickered and went dark. They were trapped. Daniel coughed, waving smoke from his face. "Great. Just great. Now we're cut off from the others." Seraphine steadied herself, her glowing form shining faintly in the dim light. She placed a hand against the wreckage, testing it. "Too heavy. We cannot move it without help." Daniel shook his head. "Then we'll have to find another way out. Come on." He grabbed a handheld scanner from his toolkit and led the way deeper into the damaged corridor. Pipes hissed with escaping steam, and sparks rained from broken panels. The floor tilted slightly, evidence of the ship's weakened structure. Seraphine followed close behind, her calm presence grounding him despite the chaos. They reached a junction where debris blocked one path completely. The scanner showed faint life signs ahead, but the readings flickered. Daniel frowned. "Looks like some of the crew are trapped on the other side. But we can't reach them from here." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "We must save them." Daniel hesitated. "Seraphine, we might not even make it out ourselves." Her gaze turned sharp. "And yet you would still try, would you not?" Daniel met her eyes and, despite the fear pressing on him, managed a small smile. "Yeah, I guess I would." They pushed forward, crawling through a narrow maintenance shaft that bypassed the blocked corridor. The metal creaked under their weight, and Daniel's palms grew slick with sweat. The ship shuddered again from another blast, and for a moment he feared the shaft would collapse around them, but Seraphine's voice, calm and steady, urged him on. "Do not stop. Fear is loud, but it does not control you." They emerged on the other side into another smoke-filled hall. 2 crew members lay pinned beneath fallen debris. Daniel rushed to them while Seraphine raised her hands. Her body glowed brighter, and shards of crystal energy formed around her like tools of light. With careful precision, she lifted the heavy debris as though it weighed nothing. Daniel pulled the crew members free. They were shaken but alive. "Go," he urged them. "Find the others. Stay safe." The crew hurried away, leaving Daniel and Seraphine alone again. They pressed deeper into the ship, searching for a way back to the others. The lights grew dimmer, the walls more scarred. Every step carried the risk of collapse. Finally, they reached a wide chamber where the hull had been badly damaged. A jagged hole exposed the stars beyond, the void of space stretching endlessly. Emergency shields flickered weakly, holding back the vacuum. Daniel's breath caught. If those shields fail, this whole section will vent. Seraphine stepped forward, her gaze steady on the failing barrier. "Then we must hold it." Her body shone with dazzling light as she pressed her palms against the shield generator. Crystalline energy surged from her, weaving into the failing barrier. The flickering steadied, the shield glowing stronger under her power. Daniel stared in awe. "You're holding it together." Sweat beaded on her brow. "Not for long. You must find a way to repair the system." Daniel dropped to his knees, by the console, tools flying from his kit. His hands worked fast, guided by instinct and training. Sparks burned his fingers, and the console resisted his efforts, but he pushed on. All the while, Seraphine stood firm, her body glowing brighter, her voice calm, even through strain. You risk yourself for others without thought. That is strength. Daniel. He gritted his teeth, twisting wires into place. And you risk yourself for me, he shot back. I guess that makes us both foolish. Her lips curved faintly, even as she fought to hold the barrier. Not foolish, brave. The console sparked once more, then hummed to life. The emergency shield stabilized, glowing steady blue. Daniel exhaled in relief. It's holding. You can stop now. Slowly, Seraphine withdrew her hands. The glow of her body dimmed, and for a moment she swayed with exhaustion. Daniel caught her before she could fall. Easy, he said softly, steadying her. You've done enough. Her eyes met his, closer now than ever before. You risked everything for this ship. For me. Why? Daniel swallowed hard. The truth pressed against his chest, and this time he didn't stop it. Because I care. Because when I saw you in that hangar, I didn't just see an ambassador. I saw someone who changed the way I think about everything, and I couldn't stand by and lose you. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the distant hum of the ship. Then Seraphine spoke, her voice softer than ever. When you whispered, I heard not only with my ears but with my heart. The Aelari call it the resonance. Rarely does another's truth reach us in this way, but your words did. And now, I feel something I cannot name. Daniel's chest tightened. You don't have to name it. I know what it is. Their eyes held each other's, the world around them forgotten. But before the fragile moment could deepen, the ship shuddered, violently. The intercom blared. All hands brace for impact. Daniel pulled Seraphine close as another blast shook the chamber. Metal groaned, sparks flew, and the corridor behind them collapsed in flames. When the shaking stopped, the two of them stood together in the ruined chamber, their breaths heavy, their hearts racing. They were alive, but barely, and the battle outside was far from over. In that moment, Daniel realized the truth. He and Seraphine were no longer just an engineer and an ambassador. They were two lives bound together by fire, by fear, and by a whisper that had grown into something greater. And whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The Aurora's promise drifted quietly through space. Its shields held, and the damage from the recent attacks was slowly being repaired. Engineers moved carefully along the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast halls, while diplomats gathered in the council chamber to resume discussions. Yet despite the outward calm, tension lingered. Ambassadors whispered, eyes flicking to the Aelari delegation. And Daniel. Daniel could not forget what had happened in the damaged corridors, nor the bond that had formed between him and Seraphine. He walked through the hall, toolkit in hand, but his mind was elsewhere. Every corner of the ship reminded him of the last attack, the smoke, the sparks, the way Seraphine had shone like a living light. And in his heart he knew the council would not soon forget either. The council chamber was full once more. Ambassadors took their seats, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. Seraphine entered gracefully, her crystalline form glowing softly in the chamber's light. She carried herself with the same calm authority as before, but her eyes searched for Daniel. He stepped forward, remaining at the edge as the council began. Reports of the enemy attacks were delivered, along with damage assessments and strategy plans. The chamber hummed with discussions of alliances, military strength, and future precautions. Finally, the session turned to Seraphine. The room fell, quiet as all eyes focused on the Aelari ambassador. Ambassadors, she began, her voice calm but firm. Our ship has faced danger. Our people have survived because of courage, skill, and unity. But there is a lesson beyond survival that we must not ignore. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Daniel, who lowered his eyes slightly but did not look away. When I first arrived, I believed my duty required me to follow tradition strictly, she continued. I believed that bonds of the heart were secondary to legacy and responsibility. I believed that my decisions should never be influenced by curiosity, emotion, or choice. The chamber stirred. Murmurs passed from seat to seat. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued. "But," she said, her voice rising slightly, "I have learned differently. I have seen honesty, courage, and love in a form I had never expected from a human engineer named Daniel. And through this, I have realized that true strength is not only in duty, but in choice. In seeing another being as a partner, as a friend, as someone whose worth is not measured by status, but by heart." A hush fell over the chamber. Many ambassadors struggled to hide their surprise. The Ilari had never spoken this way in a council before. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tight with emotion. He had never imagined she would speak like this. Not here. Not before the leaders of dozens of civilizations. Seraphine's eyes met his again, unwavering. "From this day forward, the Ilari shall honor not only duty and legacy, but also chosen bonds of the heart. Our people will not dismiss affection or honesty, nor will we fear the strength that comes from love." Some ambassadors gasped. Others whispered in shock. But Seraphine's calm presence held the room in silence. "And," she continued, "I choose to recognize such a bond here, with Daniel. Not because he is human, not because of status, but because he has shown me truth and courage beyond measure." Daniel's heart skipped. He had never felt so seen, so acknowledged. Yet he remained careful, unsure how to respond in such a public, historic moment. "Do you?" he began, but she raised her hand slightly, motioning for him to remain still. Seraphine turned to the council again. "Let this be an example. Let it be a message across the stars, that even the smallest voice, the quietest whisper can inspire change. Even a human engineer can remind a civilization of its own forgotten truths." The chamber erupted, not with applause but with shocked chatter. Some ambassadors leaned forward, eager to discuss the implications. Others sat stiffly, unsure of what to make of this sudden shift in tradition. Daniel, meanwhile, stood quietly, overwhelmed. He could barely process her words. And yet one thought rang clear in his mind. She had chosen him. Not for politics, not for appearance, but for truth. After the council, Seraphine found Daniel in the quiet of the observation deck. Stars glittered endlessly beyond the glass, their distant light reflecting in her crystalline form. "You did well," she said softly. "Today, you helped me speak what my people needed to hear." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do anything. You did it. You changed everything yourself." She smiled faintly, though her eyes held warmth beyond the formality of diplomacy. "You helped me see the courage to do it. Without you, I might still have remained silent." Daniel took a deep breath. I never thought a whisper could do something like this." Seraphine stepped closer. "Sometimes the smallest truth carries the greatest weight. You have reminded me of that." Daniel's chest tightened. "Then, does this mean you're choosing me?" Her crystalline glow softened. "Yes, I choose you, Daniel. Not because tradition demands it, not because it is convenient, but because your honesty, your courage, and your heart have earned it." His hand shook slightly, but he reached for hers. Their fingers touched, the warmth of human flesh against her shimmering crystal. For a moment, the universe felt still. "I promise," Daniel whispered, "to honor that trust. To stand with you, whatever comes. And I," she said, her voice calm and clear, "will stand with you. Together, not as ambassador and engineer, but as two beings who have chosen to walk side by side." News of Seraphine's declaration spread quickly throughout the ship. Some human diplomats were amazed, some aliens intrigued. Even the crew whispered with excitement, recognizing the courage it took to defy tradition and speak the truth of the heart. Daniel walked through the corridors with a new sense of pride. He was still just an engineer, still small in the grand scheme of the council. Yet he knew he had played a part in something extraordinary. He had reminded an alien civilization that even honesty and courage could inspire change. And more importantly, He had found a bond with Seraphine that went beyond politics, beyond duty, and beyond expectation. The next day, the Aurora's Promise resumed its journey. Repairs continued, diplomatic meetings resumed, and the stars stretched endlessly ahead. Yet the quiet moments between Daniel and Seraphine became a small refuge from the demands of duty. They walked together along the observation deck, shared meals in the quiet dining hall, and spoke of dreams and hopes. Each moment reinforced their bond, teaching them both that connection was not a weakness but a strength unlike any other. And as they looked out at the stars, Daniel whispered, just as he had months before, "Wow, she's amazing." This time, however, there was no embarrassment, no fear. Seraphine heard him, as always, and she smiled, crystal light reflecting the stars, and said simply, "And I am glad you see it, Daniel." Together, they faced the vastness of space, ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might send. But now they faced it not alone. Side by side, heart to heart, choice to choice. The galaxy watched quietly, and perhaps for the first time, it understood something humans had always known. That courage, honesty, and love could change not just a life, but an entire civilization. And in that moment, Daniel realized something he had whispered once, long ago in the hangar, was no longer a dream. It had become reality. They were together, and the stars, endless and bright, stretched before them like a promise.